Welcome to Recharge with Richardson, 5 minutes of hope and inspiration every Monday and Thursday. And now, here is today's episode. Well, good morning to each one of you. I'm really excited to be back with you for this episode of Recharge with Richardson. You know, I really want these brief moments that we have with all of our pastors on this video cast to bring you hope and courage and peace as we navigate through this world that's in upheaval all around us. I've entitled my thoughts today, Together is Better. And I'm very passionate about this as we find the current environment of the world around us is forcing us into isolation and withdrawal from others. And there's vast amounts of evidence of emotional and relational and psychological damage that it's doing to us. You see, our environment is the living space we find ourselves in at any given time. It's what we see and hear and smell and touch and taste around us. That's our environment. And the context in which we live and experience life is our environment. And for the next few episodes, I want to deal with our environment and its impact on us and its importance to us. Here's a really powerful scripture about togetherness versus isolation. It's in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 through 25. And it says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promises faithful." So first of all, let's keep our eyes on Jesus and hold fast the hope that we have in him. Don't let the stuff that's going on around you rob you of keeping your eyes on Jesus and the hope that he's given you. And then it goes on, and let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. Not, how do we do that? Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. That word exhorting means to encourage. And so part of the encouraging here is that we encourage each other to gather, to be assembled together, to be with other people. And this is how we're going to stir up love and good works and faith and hope and courage in this crazy world in which we live. And this is so important because what we see going on around us right now. How does our environment impact our health? It can really affect us, not just physically or emotionally, but spiritually. And the verse we just read tells us that we need to be intentional about our spiritual environment. Our personal devotions, family worship, and then corporate worship. The world around us creates an environment that's unfriendly towards salvation. That's why we need to be purposeful to create it for ourselves, and not just for ourselves, but for our children. Hebrews says we should consider how to stir up love and good works. In other words, think and plan for it specifically. That's the consider part. Don't just go along with the flow or just hope it happens by accident, but consider it, plan it, be intentional about it. And if we're not having personal devotions, if we're not having family worship together morning and evening, if we're not attending church and corporate worship regularly, and by regularly, by the way, I mean not just once or twice a month, but I mean almost every week. If we're not doing those things, how on earth are we going to be able to counteract the ungodly influence of the world that's around us 24 hours a day, that's around us all the time? How are we going to survive in this crazy COVID time where physical health is challenged, where emotional health and isolation are such big issues? How are we going to manage it if we don't practice those things that I just talked about: personal devotions, family devotions, and corporate worship together on a regular basis? When our kids spend more time in front of the TV and the internet getting loaded up on pop culture than they do with the Bible and spiritual books, do we think that a little bit of time in church for an hour or two once a week, or even going to a Christian school, is going to keep them close to the Lord? The statistics that show us that young people are leaving the Christian church in general in droves proves otherwise. but in families who are faithful about creating that spiritual environment, in those families, the success rate of keeping our kids close to the Lord and them just choosing to stay in the church, it's much, much higher. It's not perfect, but it's much, much higher. Since the COVID pandemic, by the way, we've all been encouraged to isolate ourselves, socially distance from others, and even people in our own household at times. We've been told that physical safety from the virus is the absolute most important thing. And while we've been doing that and protecting ourselves physically, it's had the unintended effect of devastating mental health. Suicides have risen dramatically as people have, and more people are needing professional therapy. Back in October, I read an article from, I think it was Fox News or something, that Japan had more deaths due to suicide in the month of October in 2020, in that month alone, that it had from the entire COVID pandemic up to that point in time. That's phenomenal. It makes me ask myself the question, is physical safety from the virus really the most important thing we need to be thinking about? When more people die from suicide, from mental health, emotional health issues in 1 month alone, why did they die? It was because of the isolation being caused by the physical distancing in the pandemic and isolating from other people. It was because of that social isolation. And so it really makes me ask myself, is really physical safety the most important thing that we need to be concerned about? God knew what he was talking about when he told us in Hebrews chapter 10 not to forsake assembling ourselves together. And he also said that it's even more important the closer we get to the return of Jesus. And so I want to encourage you, be careful to do your part to avoid COVID. Take the precautions that the CDC is recommending, but then trust God to protect you beyond what you can humanly do, because you cannot humanly guarantee that your precautions are going to keep you from COVID. Trust God to protect you beyond what you can humanly do, and overcome your fear and find a way to gather, find a way to be with other people, to worship with them, to pray with them, and to be encouraged by them. Because, dear friends, you and I desperately need it, not just for our spiritual health and environment, but we need it for our emotional health too. God knew what he was talking about when he said that in Hebrews. And I want to close with Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. I don't want to see you in that situation, either physically or emotionally or spiritually. And so I want to encourage you, even in these times, find a way to gather. God gave us each other for a reason. We're stronger together. Together is better. And I want you to remember, God's got this, and God's got you. Thank you for joining us for Recharge with Richardson. Don't forget to join us for our next episode, and until then, may God fill you with joy and peace and hope.